Welcome to Future Talk. Today's topic is the future of customer service. We're going to examine how brands gain competitive advantage by building relationships with their customers. To stay competitive in today's marketplace, businesses must provide a good experience at every point of customer contact, from the company website to the actual purchase to support after the purchase. One of the most important trends in customer service today is the increased use of artificial intelligence. There's also a question of privacy. How much of our personal information do businesses really need in order to provide good service? Here to discuss these issues is my guest, Keith Pearce. Keith is a Senior Vice President at Genesys, which provides 11,000 organizations all over the world with customer experience technology. He's lived and worked around the world for over 20 years, creating innovative marketing programs for a wide range of companies, and he brings a unique global perspective to his work. Keith, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Keith, let's start with this. What are some of the common mistakes that companies make regarding customer service?
Yeah, you know, it's some of the mistakes they make with a lot of other things. They try to save money and think of customer service as a cost, and try to automate a lot of things. This is what creates a lot of frustrations that I know some of your viewers can relate to. And that's really taken a toll. And today, as you read in your intro, in a very competitive world, customer service is something they have to pay much more attention to, because their reputation is more and more what customers say about them, the power of peer influence. So the advertising can't keep up with a bad service experience that somebody might go and talk about on a review site or talk about in a forum. So they're starting to get more and more attuned to the fact that they can't just treat it as a cost, which is the mistake.
Now, when we're talking about customer service here, I think we're talking mostly about online service. We're not talking about going into a retail store. That's another topic.
Right. We're not talking about brick and mortar, customer service that you'd see at the countertop, but we really need to think about the whole customer experience, because somebody might be great as a clerk in a store, but when you go to get support from the website or by texting a number on the product that you bought in the store, there needs to be consistency across all those touch points. So that's really what companies are trying to do today, is connect all those places of service, the web, the mobile experience, the phone, and the storefront, to create a consistency.
Now, many companies have telephone service, so you have a problem, there's a phone number you can call, and very often you get someone who is not a native English speaker, maybe he has a bit of an accent, maybe it's a little hard to understand. I realize it's cheaper to hire people in other countries, but what can companies do to make it easier for the customer?
Yeah, part of when you asked the question about what's been done wrong and the pursuit of cost savings is why a lot of companies went to offshore to support their 1-800 numbers. Sometime around the mid-'80s, the front door of a company became a 1-800 number. And then when that happened, they were dealing with massive volumes of phone calls from customers, and how they dealt with handling those is what pursued these cost-saving strategies. So what we see today is you shouldn't be able to tell who you're dealing with or where they are, whether they're in India or in the Ukraine or in Nebraska. It should be you're just solving the customer's problem. And what's interesting now, and you alluded to this, is the introduction of automation in the form of artificial intelligence. So a text message that might be coming not from a person in India, but from a machine, from a bot, or a chat interaction that might be happening on a website might be coming from a machine and not a person. So really the ultimate is a complete indistinction to the customer of where the person is that they're dealing with. And really understanding what customers want, not just what does a company have available to serve them, but the leaders in customer service are thinking how to serve customers on their terms.
Well, do they study customer psychology? It's not enough to know the technical part, but you're dealing with a human being. They might be very knowledgeable, or they might be completely ignorant of the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the mistakes companies have made is they've tried to, and not just automate, but almost script what people have to say. So, when you look behind the curtain of what happens when you dial a 1-800 number, and what some of your viewers may not appreciate is that somebody may be very much wanting to help you, but they've been told they have to read from a script. And whether they're in India or in Nebraska, they're having to follow a protocol that the company has said, step 1, step 2, step 3, for example. And deviating from that is going outside of a service level, for example. So, you know, taking the harness off and letting people solve problems for people is also what companies are trying to do.
Wasn't there also an issue that these service people have to produce high volume? They want to answer as many issues as they can per hour. If you spend too much time with one customer, you're not being productive enough.
That's right.
But if you cut a customer off and the problem isn't solved, then you have an unhappy customer.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's kind of 80-20 principle in customer service. You know, handle 80% of the calls or the customer inquiries within 20 seconds, for example. And our question is always, well, what if 20% of your customers are the most valuable that aren't getting that 20-second treatment? And because of that, that mentality of meeting a metric rather than satisfying what a customer wants, you know, that's another thing people should appreciate, is that that person wants to help you, but they've been told they have to do this in 2 minutes, and they can't deviate from that 2 minutes. And at 2 minutes in a second, they're getting an alert or they're getting a screen that flashes that tells them to wrap up.
Nowadays, I notice that companies are very anxious for feedback. So whenever I have some kind of online customer service, I get a survey. How did we do?
Yeah.
And the survey might be longer than the entire phone call.
Yeah.
I just take 15 minutes to answer all these questions. And do you think that's good customer service? I mean, to me, that's really the most annoying part of the whole experience.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting. Right at the moment, there's two schools of thought to that. One is the most apt time to ask that question is right after they've had the service, when they'll remember it. There's another school that says wait, and you'll get a higher acceptance rate of that when somebody's had a chance to process what they just did. I think I'm with you. We've over-rotated on the I just want to go about my day. I don't want to take time to give you all this feedback. But I think finding the right balance, you know, companies are very well intended. They're paying more attention to service. They want to know what they can do better. And it's just a matter of what's the right moment to present that survey.
Now, do you think we're heading toward robotic telephone service? Right now, if you have online customer service where you're typing the messages back and forth, sometimes you can tell you're talking to a robot. They always use the same phraseology all the time. But are they getting good enough that they can provide voice service without your knowing the difference?
It's getting pretty close. And, you know, there are different philosophies to that. Some companies say, we want to be transparent. We want right away for that customer to know they're dealing with a robot. Others, the technology is good enough so that they can't decipher whether that's a person or not, especially when it's a text message or a chat message. And at the end of the day, the customer doesn't care. They just want their answer, and they want it fast, and they want it to be right. So, you know, there's a balance between what kind of issue am I dealing with. If I'm dealing with a sensitive issue around an insurance policy and I've had a death in the family, probably not appropriate to deal with a robot. You know, I need a human. So really understanding and deciphering the context of what people are looking for, and then what's the right treatment from a company.
Now, there's a feeling that it's the company's responsibility to make sure that you have a good experience, but is there anything that you, the customer, can do to increase your chances of getting a good experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a lot of things customers can do. I think, you know, we're used to hearing, I'll switch if I don't like the service, right, from consumers. I've got a lot of other choices. And the reality is, if you develop an appreciation for the people that are trying to give you service, and you understand and you practice empathy with them, being a good customer is part of getting great service. You know, we don't talk about that a lot because we just say, well, the customer's always right. And the reality is, if you know that you have an issue, a persistent issue, and you haven't gotten the answer you need, having information at your disposal about that issue, knowing who you've talked to before, knowing your customer number, those kind of things can help the person that's trying to serve you. Because ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to decipher what the answer is, and they're having to look up information to do that. So being prepared as a customer is part and parcel of getting good service.
Well, I think sometimes customers might be tempted to present a lot of extraneous information like, this is the 5th time I've called you for this, or I can't stand this company. Not really relevant to the problem. Do customers need to develop an approach where they just stick to the facts of the case?
Yeah, I mean, the very first thing and the hardest thing for people to do in customer service is identify and verify. It's the first thing a customer service rep has to do. I know I'm dealing with Marty, and I've gone through the verification protocols, some of which the government requires, the regulators require, not just their company. So that person hasn't decided that. So this is the kind of empathy to understand. Why do I have to tell you that? You have to tell me that because there's a law that says I have to verify you're who you are before I can access your account or give you certain information. So if you understand that as a customer, being prepared with your customer information, your social security number, if you're a repeat caller, so you've had a service issue and you're calling back, you're often given a case number. And that case number is so a person can look up that record and be able to access your information faster. So again, those are some of the things that are important to develop to being a good customer and getting good customer service.
Now, what if a robot is answering the phone? Do you have to program the robot to recognize different emotional states on the part of the customer and know when the customer is angry, know when the customer is short-tempered, and respond appropriately to that?
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting. You talked about AI in your introduction, and that's part of what artificial intelligence can do now is what we call emotion detection. So not only do we know when you might be angry, and that there's a specialist who can deal with you that's not a robot. An angry person, a robot is probably not the answer for their issue. It might be someone that's highly skilled at diffusing an upset customer, for example. But also, where the technology is going, and what's interesting is, I might know that you've said something that indicates you're particularly ready to be sold to or marketed to. You're responding to a marketing campaign, or you're interested in a certain product. So the technology is recognizing that and then making a match about who's the best sales specialist, who's the one that knows the most about this product to get you their information, and really trying to deal with a lot of different information, a lot of different data, and get it to the right response for the company.
So the robot might be the entry point, and they'll refer you to somebody who's a little more specialized, maybe.
Could be. It could be the entry point. It could be, you know, in retail, for example, where's my order? You know, order status is the #1 thing that people call about. I've just ordered a dining set from Williams-Sonoma. I want to know when it's going to arrive. So WISMO is what they call that in industry terms, where's my order? And robots are very good at that. If you know your order number and you can verify who you are, you'll get fast, responsive service, and sometimes you'll get it without even having to make a phone call. You can get that right from the website of the customer.
Now, you've worked in a number of different countries working on customer service.
Yeah.
What can you say about different expectations in different countries? Are some cultures more demanding than others as far as what they expect from companies they do business with?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that. You know, there's almost where the countries I've worked in outside of North America where there isn't choice, right? So that's the phone company. And so you're dealing with an institutional approach versus a much more sort of competitive approach to, I'm going to use service as a differentiator. But I use the example of the French, and I think the French get a bad rap around their service, especially from Americans. For me, that's a culture where the business feels almost like a personal responsibility to taking care of you, but they're looking for certain behavior from you in order to do that. So in other words, in France, I think the best customer service experiences I've ever had have been, and that's when I learned to show appreciation for the provider of the service or of the product. And when I took the time to do that and acknowledge them and showed the respect that they were owed or felt they were owed, it's the best service experience that I've ever had.
But if you're rude to them first, they'll probably be rude back, and then you'll blame them.
Just like any human, right? Having that, absolutely. But I think in other cultures where national pride and identity is there, having the right salutation, having the right greeting, having the right acknowledgement that you respect the services they're offering is a great starting point. And it's not a subtle thing. It's something that customers really should think about.
So like cultural sensitivity.
Sure.
You know who
Absolutely.
you're talking to, and you know a little
Absolutely.
bit about their background, and
Absolutely.
what can you say, what can you not say,
Absolutely.
et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think just having a reset of expectations that, you know, in our culture in North America, speed is where we're consumed with getting things quickly. We're always on the go. We're always in front of a screen. In some other countries, that's not always their modus operandi. Right? They may be more relaxed, especially in certain seasons. And you should acknowledge that. You shouldn't just expect that you're going to have a fast reply. Maybe somebody wants to get to know you a little bit as a customer because they think they can treat you better and serve your needs better. So, you know, put in the investment of time to get that, is my advice.
Well, it's really experience, right? Like every company wants to improve, wants to do better business. So it's always trying to see how are we doing, how can we do better. You try something, it works, you do it more. It doesn't work, you know, you do it less. So it's constantly tinkering and tweaking the system until you get it right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Now in your company, so your company, Genesys, makes customer service software. So I don't expect you to reveal any proprietary information, although your customers know what the features are. But are there any interesting features you can tell us about that companies get when they get your services?
Well, yeah, I mean, we make customer service software. We make software for sales and marketing departments as well. But really, our software helps companies manage their interactions with their customers. What is interesting and what is really the new frontier is artificial intelligence. So we're becoming more and more skilled at knowing what your preferences are. And just the same way that if you're shopping on Amazon or eBay, and noticing that your likes and preferences are being paid attention to. When you buy a product, you get what others that bought this product like this, right? Or you might add this component to the product you just bought to have a better experience. We're applying that same sort of learning about customer behavior to service. And we can start to make predictions about what the best outcome to serve you would be. And for companies, that's very important because they want the loyalty of customers to sort of, serve them in the future and get more, wallet share and profit from them.
That also raises a certain issue of privacy, where if you buy a book on Amazon, the next time you go on there, it'll recommend a bunch of other books.
Right.
Or if you visit a website or click on something, you'll see a bunch of ads for that.
Yeah.
I mean, might some people be annoyed by that? Like, I don't want these people to know all that much about my taste. Is that?
That's a great point. That's very much in the culture now with the GDPR regulations the European Union has passed, the extreme consumer data privacy protection. Some of what happened in our elections with the Cambridge Analytica and the hacking of, or the use of data on Facebook to sort of exploit that data. And I do think exploitation is the word that people use when they think about privacy now, is that they didn't know companies were using their information in these ways. So for us in service and in applying that notion of service, we've historically felt like people were willing to share information in exchange for a better and more personalized experience. And I think companies have overinvested in systems to sell you more, right? To learn what to sell you more at the expense of systems to personalize and tailor your service interactions so you get the answer that you want faster.
So short-term profit, but not necessarily thinking so much of the long-term relationship with the customer.
Exactly.
Now, what does this European regulation do? The General Data Protection Regulation? What?
Yeah, so that is an implication for any company who does business in the European Union. And the European Union, and it's not a first, they've been aggressive going against some monopolistic companies, Google and Microsoft, namely for baking their browser into their operating system, for example. So this is not a first from the European Union. They've been very pro-consumer, and there are a lot of consumer advocacy groups in the United States that are advocating similar laws. What that basically says is you have to be explicit with customers about how you're using the information. So many of your viewers may have noticed, if you've been to a website for the first time, you're getting this acknowledgement form on the website that basically says explicitly how we're using the information we track about your mouse and about where you're clicking. that's an impact directly of GDPR. So, that's got an implication for companies who operate in the European Union or sell outside the United States.
Now, they might be using it in enough ways that you can get a 50-page legal document describing how they're going to use this information. So I'm assuming it's got to be down to a paragraph, right?
Well, it's shorter than it used to be, but for many companies, those consent terms are legal documents, and most people don't read them. But I think it has elevated the privacy issue to an important level, an important discussion around what's the right thing to do with the customer information we have.
Now, how important is privacy? Some people might say, well, if you're not doing anything bad, then you shouldn't matter who knows all your personal tastes.
Yeah.
But then some people might say, well, everybody's doing something bad somewhere, something that they don't want the entire world to know about.
Yeah.
And you would like to control that data. Maybe you would like to delete certain aspects of your personal information while retaining the rest of it. So does this GDPR give the users, is it just a warning, informing the customers, the users, or does it actually enable them to control something?
It doesn't enable them to control something so much as makes more explicit than it ever has how a company may use your information, how they may resell your data to someone else. And so much of our world now is where you click, your digital footprint or fingerprint is very valuable for companies that may be dealing downstream from the company you do business with, right? So those preferences, those likes, that past purchase history, that home address and phone number is why companies who don't have an explicit revenue model are able to make money selling ads. And that's for some of your viewers, you've been on a website, you looked at a product for a while, and if you go to another website and you start to see ads for that product, but you're not on that website you were on before, that's you're being trailed, or you're being tracked with ad tracking software to try to get you to buy the sweater you were looking at Land's End, for example.
We're all these different companies online, and they can all gather data from each other. We're heading toward it being sort of one huge network where any input you give on any part of the network is automatically known on the rest of the network, even if theoretically it's a different company.
Yeah, well, our online behavior, and it's coming to the surface, I think, and it's coming to the surface in a good way, is it's not very clear who owns that. So we'll see what.
It's not just the products that you buy; it's your political preferences. A lot of people would pay money to know who you voted for.
Absolutely.
And if a lot of those people are concentrated in a certain area, that's valuable information.
Absolutely. I think it's a great thing that there's more transparency around this than there has been. And I think it's a great thing that companies who were exploiting that information for revenue gain are being much more clear about that was wrong, first of all, and that they're trying to take responsibility for it in the future.
But do you think trying to keep privacy is ultimately a losing battle in the digital age? We can have regulations, but ultimately everything you do is being recorded somewhere, and as long as it's being recorded, somebody's going to be able to access it.
Yeah, I mean, what we lose sometimes in the conversation around privacy is how convenient our lives have become by virtue of the information we've shared that have been able to tailor an experience or a product exactly for us, to solve a problem exactly for us. And so, you have to balance the conversation with science and medicine are making huge leaps around using data to find patterns and trends and create medicine and products that are going to help.
Well, sometimes if you get information that you have an affinity for, that can be kind of limiting. So, for example, in Facebook, if you express certain preferences, you'll get information that reinforces those preferences but doesn't expose you to different possibilities.
That's right.
And I think they're working on that now, because what you develop is a self-reinforcing echo chamber which confirms your preconceived beliefs.
Absolutely.
So where do you see this leading us? In 10 years from now, what is this going to look like, do you think?
I'm an optimist. I have a very positive view around whether it's in our lives around commerce or around obtaining service for companies, where we'll just have enriched experience with companies. I think, in short, the potential of the future is that you can communicate with a company the way you communicate with your family and friends, with the same kind of modalities, with the same kind of ease and convenience, and you can actually get meaningful interactions from a company that engenders you to that company in the future I think that's where we're going, and I think it's a very positive thing for the industry.
Now, do you think with machines taking over everything, it's going to put all these customer service people out of work?
No, and it's a great question, because that's right now, I think, the myth we have to bust. I think that if anything, it elevates the role of the human in customer service and in interaction. You know, I've been asked a lot of times, well, isn't voice dead? What we call voice in our industry is using the phone. And my response is always, well, as long as we stop talking to each other as people. And hopefully in my lifetime that doesn't happen. So as long as we value the human, and we do, we very much believe that this notion of a blended interaction between a human and artificial intelligence. In fact, some of the most interesting leaps in innovation can come from artificial intelligence helping service agents. So powering them with all-knowing information about how to solve a customer problem, instead of the bot solving it, you know, in a chat interaction or in some mechanical interaction.
Now, some people have a fear that the machines will stop being our servants and start being our masters at some point. Do you think that's science fiction, or is that
well,
a
you know,
serious risk?
I didn't, you know, I don't prescribe to the HAL theory so much that that they're going to all turn on us someday.
Or they'll be controlled by people who are trying to master us through machines.
Yeah, no, I think, well, I mean, Turing's test was essentially, can I distinguish a human from a computer, you know, way back when, right, in the 1940s. And I think today you would be very hard pressed to be able to tell. And I'm not sure what that tipping point means necessarily, from a, you know, this is bad for society versus we're using, you know, we're being intelligent about how we apply this to solve problems for people. But clearly, you know, it's infallible, right? When self-driving cars make a mistake, the margin of error is really high. In reality, computers are much better at driving cars than people are.
And I think we're going to have to leave it at that, because we're out of time.
We could go a long ways on that.
So I'd like to thank you very much for being here. Keith Pearce, Senior Vice President of Genesys. Thank you for watching. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. For Future Talk, I'm Marty Wasserman, and we'll see you next time.